This episode is brought to you by the Human Amplified Healing Priorities Workbook. I created this workbook to help you intentionally decide on and prioritize which part of your holistic health you need or want to work on first, and then I give you tools to take action in the area you choose. Visit humanamplified.com/episodes/093 to download your free workbook. I'm your host, Brandy Fleck, and this is Human Amplified. We're on a mission to revamp society by amplifying your humanity. This week on the show.
Hi, my name is Hannah Bethel, and I'm based in Nashville, Tennessee. Every moment that we've lived compiles to the now moment. As humans, we can get into cyclical thought patterns that we spend all of our time in our head. And then I heard a voice in my ear, like an angel, that said, Lyme disease. It kind of set the stage for the rest of my life. It taught me to check in with the body.
This week, we're continuing with our focus on the human body by talking to Nashville singer-songwriter, Reiki master, and hypnotherapist Hannah Bethel about her journey with Lyme disease, adventures in nature, and her latest music. It is all related. First, we dig deep into Hannah's adventurous spirit, specifics of solo hikes she took in Alaska and Sedona, Arizona, how she challenged limiting beliefs, and later we circle back around to how that love for adventure carries over into what she loves about touring. In between, we learn how Lyme disease set the stage for Hannah's current music career, which was just taking off when she first became unwell. After a couple years of healing, Hannah was able to get back into making music, coupled with her passion to help others come into health holistically. I've oftentimes said music has healed me and held me together in some of the hardest times in my life. So it's really interesting to look at how music and healing have intertwined in Hannah's life. Yes, we discussed the specifics of getting a Lyme diagnosis, from what tests to take, what practitioners Hannah went to, and also, and most importantly, how she learned to listen to her body. But the bigger lessons here are all about how every part of being human impacts every other part, and that mindset and attitude are, no pun intended, instrumental in making progress. So relax for the next hour as Hannah makes the connection for us between listening to your own body in healing and in making music, using the subtle cues to navigate decision-making and the joys of vulnerability. At the end of the episode, we also jump in with some details about Hannah's newly released EP, a particularly vulnerable album, Until the Sun Comes Back Around, which you'll definitely want to check out. And guys, Hannah is having a record release show at 3rd and Lindsley in Nashville on Wednesday, April 6th, 2022. Get your tickets and go listen. It'll be an absolutely amazing night out. For links mentioned throughout this episode, including links to Hannah's latest EP, singles, and tickets to her upcoming EP release show at 3rd and Lindsley, visit the show notes at humanamplified.com/episodes/093. Hannah, welcome to Human Amplified. I'm so excited to have you here today, and I just can't wait to dive into your story. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm super excited to be here chatting with you, and also really excited to share some parts of my story that I don't usually talk about much. So very excited about that.
Okay, awesome. You know, before we talk about the music that you do, we are going to talk about a lot of things you've been through. And I feel like that's got to influence all of your creativity and the music that you make. Would you say that's accurate?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, all of us, every moment that we've lived compiles to the now moment where we are. So none of us would be who we are without every single step we've taken.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, great. So before we dive into all of that, will you please introduce yourself to our listeners? Tell them a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. Well, my name's Hannah Bethel. I'm a singer-songwriter. I'm also a Reiki master and integrative hypnotherapist. I live here in Nashville, Tennessee. I moved here when I was 18 years old, moved from Michigan, and just kind of moved here for music, hit the ground running. And it's been absolutely nonstop fun and madness ever since.
Gotcha. That's awesome. And, so often we hear stories of people moving to Nashville to pursue their music career. Like, has it been hard? Like, what was it like when you first came?
Gosh, I mean, yeah, it's been hard. But it's also been wonderful and magical and exciting and confusing and pretty much all the emotions you can have, infuriating. But yeah, when I moved to Nashville, I was, I guess, very green, you could say. I was like, okay, I'm moving to Nashville. I'm gonna have a record deal within a year or two and be on my way with life as I'd kind of envisioned it.
Yeah.
And turns out I had a lot of learning to do once I got here, and kind of fell into the Nashville ecosystem of how things are done here in the music industry, and spent a little bit of time getting stuck in that and trying to, play by the rules and do all the things and appease all the gods of the music row, etc. And then came to the point where I realized that didn't really serve me creatively. It just wasn't working for me. And then when I decided to just do things my own way, that's when everything kind of blossomed.
Ooh, I love that. I really do. And speaking of doing things your own way, I feel like you're a very adventurous person and you've done some really cool things aside just move to Nashville to start your career. So can you tell us a little bit about your solo hiking and where's the most beautiful place you've ever been?
Sure. Yes. I'd love to talk about this. The most beautiful place, that's a hard question because I've been blessed to see some really, really extraordinary places. I think one of the most beautiful places, driving from Anchorage, Alaska to Valdez, Alaska is just like the craziest thing I've ever seen. It looks like Lord of the Rings, and there's just mountains and glaciers and wildlife and rivers, and it's waterfalls. Oh my God, it's amazing there. And Sedona, I would say, are the most beautiful I've seen.
Okay. Can you give us a little context around your solo hiking and what made you decide to do those kinds of things?
Yeah, well, I've always loved adventure. I always have loved a little adrenaline rush. And I've also always been very deeply connected with the earth. When I was a kid, that was like my time to kind of like ground and refuel. I would spend hours in the woods alone and didn't really recognize it at the time. But now looking back, I'm like, oh, I was like regulating myself because I, felt kind of intuitively that being in nature is what balanced me out. And so I carried that love of the earth with me into adulthood. And I always wanted to do some kind of solo trip, but I also carried these beliefs as to why I couldn't, like, I don't have the experience or the knowledge, or I shouldn't do it because I'm a woman and it's not safe to do it alone.
Yeah, I was wondering if that, yeah.
Yeah. And then I just decided that I was going to do it anyways, because I just wanted to. So then I just did it.
That's awesome. Okay. So I would love for you to describe a detailed memory of the most beautiful place you've ever been in. So I know that you've been to Joshua Tree and you mentioned Sedona, which, gosh, Sedona's like, it was amazing. I went for the first time this past summer and I was like, I had never seen anything so beautiful in my life. So if you could just describe a detailed memory and what emotions you felt when you were in that beautiful place, that would be awesome.
Sure. I'll tell a story about Sedona because is also just such a, I don't know, I must have lived there before in another life or something, because the first time I drove through it, I was like, just my whole body is like vibrating and I'm crying. And I was just driving through Sedona once on tour, like don't know, decade ago. And I'm like, I got to get back here.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been back several times, but one time I was doing a backpacking trip there, and I went out to this place called Shaman's Cave, which is a kind of cave up on the cliffside, kind of out in the backcountry of Sedona. And I hike up in there intending to sleep in the cave. And it's just gorgeous. You're way up high. You're looking out over the whole valley. And then there's red rocks all around the valley. And it's just like, man, it's just extraordinary. And so I make it up to the cave. It's kind of hard to find. And then when I get there, there was a Native American man and woman in there doing some kind of ceremony. So I just kind of waited. And then after a little bit, they came out and were talking to me. Oh, what are you doing? And they saw my pack and they're like, you gonna camp out here? And I was like, yeah. And they're like, oh my God, that's awesome. Like, so many people have vision quested here, and they were super stoked for me. And then they like said a prayer over me, and then they were gone like really, really fast. Like almost that I was like, did that just happen? Or am I just like dazed out? Cause it's so beautiful.
Yeah.
So just really synchronous. And then I go into the cave and was just overwhelmed by this feeling of homecoming like I've never experienced before in my earthly life. And it was really, it's hard to put into words, but I just felt so wrapped in love. And I just was hearing the voice of my intuition, just like it felt like a crowd of people that were like just so excited that I was there. And I kept hearing like, you made it, you're finally here. And it was just incredible. It was quite mystical and unlike anything I'd ever experienced before. And I just kind of sat on the floor and cried for about an hour and
Yeah.
and then camped there, and it was amazing. I slept so well. A lot of times when I'm out backpacking, I'll wake up a lot in the night, like every sound. I'm like, oh, what's that?
Yeah.
But there I just slept so soundly. It was like the temperature was perfect. Everything, I just felt so safe and so held. And then in the morning, I climbed up on top of the cave and watched the sun come up.
Oh, wow.
And I had this little hummingbird come and sit right next to me for like minutes. And it was really cool. And since then, every time that I've done a camping backpacking trip, I've had a hummingbird come and like sit with me for a little while.
That's amazing.
So yeah, really cool.
Yeah. Okay. Were you actually in a tent or were you sleeping under the stars? Where was your camp?
I was in a tent. The tent that I had then, I could kind of take the top off though. So it was just a screen and I could look out. Cause I'm a little bit scared of like, scorpions or like snakes crawling in my pack. So I'm like, I'm going to be in a tent.
Yeah. Ooh, that's really nice. And, you mentioned like in other places that, you sort of wake up at every little sound. And I feel like I would be that way too. When you were in Alaska or maybe any other place that you want to talk about, did you ever come up against any hardship or dangerous situation that you had to navigate quickly?
Yeah, but it involved people, not nature. I'm a pretty good prepper. Like I'm pretty good about kind of measuring out how much water I need to be drinking per day, how many calories, like how far I'm going, checking the weather. So I've never been in a situation where I've been unprepared in that regard. Mm-hmm. But when I was in Sedona, the last couple nights I was there, I was camping out in this maybe like 7 or 8 mile radius of backcountry land that was like all wide open. Mm-hmm. And my second to last night, I'm setting up camp. It's almost dark and I'm just sitting outside the tent, like reading or something. And this black Jeep goes by, isn't it? And there's like not really a road out there, but there's like kind of a road you could drive if you had like a, like a Jeep or four-wheeler or something.
Yeah.
And this Jeep drives by and they kind of slow down as they're driving by me and they whistle at me. And I'm like, oh, great.
Yeah.
Awesome. But then they continue on their way and I don't see them again. So I'm like, okay, fine. Like, I know there's other people out, camping or whatever. I just can't really see anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next night was my last night there. And I was probably, I don't know, not a few miles from where I'd been the night before. And I set up camp. It's about the same time, almost dark. And this time I had my car nearby because I was going to be leaving the next morning, but almost dark. And this car comes by again with these two guys and they're like hollering, like blaring, like top 20 country music. I'm like, what is going on? So they kind of go back and forth by me a couple times. And one of the times they pass me, they get a little ways away and I hear this like banging noise. And I'm thinking maybe their car is backfiring or something.
Yeah.
And then they come back by me and they were like shooting off a gun over my head. And I'm like, what is going on? Because at the time, all I had was bear spray. I wasn't carrying or anything. So I basically just threw my tent in my car and drove away and called 911.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was pretty weird.
Like, what made them think that was okay to do? I don't,
girl, I don't know.
They were like showing off. They're like, we can shoot a gun. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It was, so that was the scariest moment. But then I went and I was really mad because I'm like, oh, it's my last night here. And I just got scared off by these weird guys. But then I ended up finding this. I drove for a few miles and I found like this little kind of clearing where several other people were camping. So I just pulled in and camped there where there was other people and actually ended up meeting some really cool, like kind of hippie gypsy people who were traveling across the country. So it ended up being a cool experience anyways.
That's good. Good. It's really interesting that like the most danger you were in involved people instead of nature. So I think there's a lesson in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, whether it's, through that experience or just being in nature, if you could sum it up, what have you gotten out of those experiences where you have gone on these adventures?
I've gotten so much. It's really a time for me to kind of regroup and spend time alone with my thoughts, which I think is very important, especially in, Western culture where it's so go, go, go. Many of us don't hardly spend any time alone or not being like stimulated in some way by TV or internet or, whatever.
Yeah.
So it's a good time for me to just check in, be honest with myself, kind of take that time to get in alignment. And it's also, it's really empowering for me every time I come back from one of these trips. I just feel like brave and I feel strong and I feel independent and self-sufficient. And I think that's another important thing for us to build, that part of us that knows it can take care of us, because we all can, but we don't often get time to connect with that.
Yeah. Yeah. I really love that. And those are really good points. And that actually brings me back to a follow-up question that sort of came up when you were talking earlier. In the beginning, when we started talking about these trips, you talked about being in nature has always helped you ground and refuel, even as a child. Can you describe for us a little bit what it means to ground? Because I know we talk about that all the time, but I don't necessarily know if it's been described. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great question, because it definitely is kind of ambiguous. But for me, I think so often as humans, we can kind of get into cyclical thought patterns. And sometimes they get spinning so fast that we spend all of our time in our head. Mm-hmm. And many of us are oftentimes very checked out of the body.
Yes.
And so not only are we not fully in this human experience that we're here to have, but when we're tuned out of the body, we're also, not able to notice if something feels different or if something feels off because we're not grounded, we're in the head, we're checked out of the body.
Ah,
And for me, like many people, it is something that I have to do kind of like all day long, every single day. I check myself back into my body. And just a simple practice of that is just kind of feeling into your feet, like feeling into the soles of your feet and the toes on the ground. And then kind of doing a body scan up, working through the ankles, the legs, just kind of slowly tuning into the whole body. And then you can go even deeper into organs. You can go, okay, how's my heart feeling? How do my lungs feel? And just kind of getting in the experience. Breath work is awesome too for this. That really gets you in the body. Or even if you find yourself in mulling over whatever it is that you always mull over in your head. We've all got, like our little stories and inner dialogues.
yeah.
Just like I'll like touch myself on the arm when I catch myself doing it. Be like, come back.
Ah, okay.
Come back, Hannah.
Yeah. That is the best description I have heard of what it means to ground. I love that. I think it's really helpful, just what you said about, living in your head means you're not fully experiencing this human experience and you have to check back into your body. So thank you for that. That's really great.
Yeah.
We're talking to Hannah Bethel, Nashville singer-songwriter, Reiki master, and hypnotherapist at Hi-Fi Healing. Her newest EP that's out is called Until the Sun Comes Back Around. It's time for a quick break. I'm your host, Brandy Fleck, and this is Human Amplified. If anything in this episode resonates with you, it might be time to focus on healing. But you might also be overwhelmed with where to even start taking better care of your health. There are so many areas to choose from because as whole humans, we are beautiful and complex, yet there's so little time. Or when you're a thinker like we are, analysis paralysis can stop you from making progress. I know it all too well, friend. That's why I put together the Healing Priorities Workbook. It's a guide to help you figure out and prioritize the healing you need the most right now, whether it's in your mind, body, or spirit. So when you download your free workbook, yes, it's totally free, you can consciously and intentionally narrow down your focus, then use the tools provided to start moving forward in the area you choose. After you identify the area to work on, I walk you through identifying 3 main goals in that area and the steps you'll take to meet each goal. I even give you example steps of how I've done this in my own life. Then we move on to motivating and reinforcing your new behaviors by giving you an area to record wins, no matter how big or small, and then reward yourself, which is so important. You can cycle through the exercises again and again each time you need to create new goals or focus in on a different area of healing. To download your free Healing Priorities Workbook, go to humanamplified.com/episodes/093. Now, back to the show. We're talking to Hannah Bethel, Nashville singer-songwriter, Reiki master, and hypnotherapist at Hi-Fi Healing. Her newest EP that's out is called Until the Sun Comes Back Around, which you can listen to where you stream or purchase your music. This season, we are really focusing on providing healing support to our listeners, and I know that you contracted Lyme disease a while back. So can you just tell us the story, the full story of like how you got it, what happened, how you got diagnosed, and sort of all of those details?
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to. This was a huge part of my early adult life and really kind of set the stage for the rest of my life in a really big way. And in many ways, I look at it as it was given to me at that time for that specific purpose. So I got 99% sure that I got it from a tick bite. I was camping in East Tennessee, and I think I was 22, and I had spent like a long weekend out in the woods there, and I was sleeping in my car, And the last morning I woke up and there was a little teeny tiny tick on my forearm, like right attached to a vein that I could see. And it was so small that I thought it was a fleck of dirt. And so I kind of went to brush it off and saw that it was attached. And I was like, oh, it's a tick. And got my tweezers and removed it, and didn't really think much of it at the time because I grew up in the woods. I'd had a lot of ticks, but I grew up in Michigan where it's more the different kind of ticks, and Lyme is not as prevalent up there. So I didn't really think much of it. And I left the trip. I remember calling my mom on the way home, just letting her know that I had survived and telling her about my weekend, and then told her that I had got a tick on me. And she's like, oh, great. Hope you don't get Lyme disease. And I was like, I'm sure I won't, Mom. I don't think hardly anybody, I didn't know anything about Lyme disease, but I was like, whatever, Mom. Just kind of ironic. And then fortunately, I started becoming symptomatic rather quickly. So within a couple months.
Okay.
Because sometimes people don't become symptomatic for years or decades even, because the Lyme bacteria is a spirochete. So it kind of like burrows into your DNA and can evade detection while it's, kind of building up in the body. So I just started getting, had neck aches and joint aches, which was kind of weird. I was only 22. And then I started experiencing like really strong thirst. And I remember saying to my friends, like, gosh, I've just been so thirsty the last couple of weeks. And they're like, drink water. I'm like, okay. So I started drinking more water. And I was kind of starting to have the thought that this seems weird.
Yeah.
But it wasn't anything severe. So I just kept going along. And then I had one weekend where I came down with something kind of like a flu, like sort of a cold, headache, tummy was not super happy kind of situation. But again, not very severe. It's pretty mild. But again, I was struck with the thought of this feels weird. Something feels not quite right in my body. And then the following week I was in a meeting and I was thinking about it again. I'm like, gosh, something just feels kind of weird. What's going on? And then I heard a voice in my ear, like an angel, that said Lyme disease. And I was like, Lyme disease? I mean, I don't really know anything about Lyme disease. And so I go home and start, researching. And I had a lot of the early symptoms. And then I had a friend I knew who had it. So I called her and she kind of gave me some pointers in the right direction. She told me I needed to get a Western blot test.
Okay.
And that I needed to get my test results in hand after I got the test. So I went to, I think, 2 different clinics and requested this Western blot test. And I was told that I didn't need it because no one has Lyme disease here and I'd just be wasting my money. And so then I went to a 3rd clinic and kind of got the same spiel. It's like, I'm sure you don't have Lyme. You really don't need that test. It was like $100 or something. They're like, you'd be wasting your money. You don't need it. And I was like, I want it anyways. I just want to take this test. And then, doctors kind of roll their eyes at me like, okay, fine, little girl.
Yeah.
And so take the test. A few days later, they call me. They're like, okay, it's, test came back negative. And I was like, okay, well, can you send me my test results? And they wouldn't. I had a hell of a time getting my test results. And I finally had to go into the clinic and I was like, give me my test results. So finally I go in and I'm just like, please just give me my test results. This is weird. So they give them to me and are kind of, got a little attitude about it. I'm like, this is freaking weird.
Yeah.
And so that's, when I started going, why is this feeling weird?
Yeah.
So get my test results. And then I ended up finding a doctor who was a Lyme specialist, took those results to him. He looked at the same results and said, yeah, you definitely have Lyme.
That's interesting.
Yeah, because according to the CDC, you have to test for so many of the antibodies need to be present for them to give you a positive test. So if you have less than the required amount of antibodies, they'll give you a negative test. So I go to this Lyme specialist doctor who put me on antibiotics for, I think, a month or two. So it's kind of an extended period of time. And that kind of helped kind of tamper it down a little bit. I think I got bit in March. I think I started getting sick around May or June. I think I found this doctor in June or July. And I had actually had to quit my job at the time, because meanwhile, like, my symptoms are just getting more and more severe. I started experiencing a lot of the cognitive symptoms of just like not being able to think clearly and like really freaking myself out. Like, I had a job at the time where I was working at a antique mall type of situation, and I was the manager, and my job every month was to mail checks to all the vendors, and I sign them, I write the addresses, stamp them, blah, blah, blah. There's like 200 of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I sent all the checks out without signing any of them. And
Oops.
and like, oops. Yeah, I got in trouble. But then like the next week, people started calling and they're like, hey, my check's not signed. And I'm like, wow, that's weird. And then it wasn't until like I'd gotten like 10 of those calls that it hit me. And then I remembered, oh, I didn't sign any of them. And then I started getting really scared, because I was like, that's super unlike me.
Yeah.
To space case like that, like 200 times.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And so then I put in my 2 weeks at that job, and I just really started going downhill. The second week of my last 2 weeks, I started working from home. And then I made it a couple days into that week, and I couldn't even finish it because I was just like, couldn't get out of bed. It was really, really scary. And I watched an excellent film. If anyone has Lyme or is curious about this, there's a film called Beneath Our Skin. That's excellent. And I think there's a sequel of it too, but I would highly recommend watching that.
Okay.
Terrifying, but good information to have. Started feeling a little better with the antibiotics. And then I think I started my job again in September, but then I just started going downhill again when I started trying to work.
Mm-hmm.
And then I eventually ended up connecting with a holistic detox practitioner, and ended up working with her for 2 years.
Okay.
On a weekly basis. And that was what eventually cured me of Lyme.
Wow. Okay. See, I feel like this is such an important conversation, because I know, like, I've known people who have gone for years, have lost years of their life without even having a diagnosis because of the attitude, we don't have Lyme here. No, you don't have Lyme. So
yeah,
I'm so glad that you were able to like be an advocate for yourself. Can you take us through some of the healing that you went through with your holistic detox practitioner and what you specifically did to be cured?
Yeah, totally. So it's important to remember that each of our bodies are going to react to different illnesses in extremely different ways, depending on what's going on in our bodies. And I think that that's a place where Western medicine really kind of misses the boat. So with this holistic practitioner, they tested my DNA, and they were able to see that I did have Lyme. I also had a co-infection, which is really common when you have something that makes you super sick. Your immune system gets run down and you get sick with something else. I also had Epstein-Barr, which is mono. And then they were also able to detect that I was getting formaldehyde poisoning from a job that I was working
Oh, wow.
at that time, then working a job where I was like printing t-shirts. So like the hot press, like with the ink, and I'm breathing it all day, was giving me formaldehyde poisoning. And the formaldehyde was attaching to the Epstein-Barr. And that was kind of creating this concoction that was, my health system at the time.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just about detoxing out the Lyme. It was getting me out of the environment where I was getting exposed to formaldehyde every day. It was also detoxing out the Epstein-Barr. So there's just so many variables that come into bringing someone into health. It's not just about one presenting issue. It's about how everything is working together. So first of all, I completely changed my diet and I cut out everything inflammatory, wheat, dairy, sugar, alcohol, basically just eating organic vegetables and fruits and meat. And I was juicing every single day. I was eating fermented foods. And that was a huge part of it. If I had not been willing to change my diet, I don't know if it would have been as successful.
Okay.
Because you have to, support the body. And if you're putting in food with pesticides or, inflammatory sugars while you're trying to heal the body, you're just kind of inhibiting that natural healing process.
Yeah.
So then with the practitioner that I worked with, I did a combination of so many different herbal supplements and vitamins, intravenous vitamins, oxygen therapy, hyperbaric chambers, which is like a pressurized kind of bed that you lay in. A lot of people with Lyme will use this. I did like ionic foot baths and hand baths, just different kind of types of laser therapy, prayer.
Yeah. First of all, thank you for giving us those like tangible steps that you took, because I think that could be really helpful for someone going through this. But you said that you thought this was given to you at this time for a reason. Does that have anything to do with the journey you were on with your music at the time, or what was that reason?
Yeah, I mean, I think it does have to do with music, just because it all has to do with everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was definitely for me to have that learning experience of showing me how to take radical responsibility for myself and my situation, and to listen to the voice of my intuition, even when people who were supposed to know better than me were telling me something different. And that was a really hard thing to do when I was 22 years old. And there's, all these doctors that are like, you don't have Lyme, there's nothing wrong with you. And I'm like, well, I can't get out of bed, so something weird is going on.
Yeah.
And I want to figure out what it is. Lyme is often misdiagnosed as other things, or goes undiagnosed, or is told there's nothing you can do. You can't cure it. You'll always have it. All you can do is take this medicine to alleviate symptoms. And I just don't think that that's the case. And my life is an example of that. Now, if you want to find healing, it takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of initiative and dedication to doing it. And I think all those things, this experience showed me that I was capable of that level of dedication, of advocating for myself, of trusting my intuition, of, doing my own research when I wasn't getting the answers I needed from the people that were supposed to be helping me.
Yeah.
At that time, I actually had just finished a music project. I'd made this music video. The video actually got picked up by CMT online, and I had a lot of different things kind of lined up to take off. Mm-hmm. And everything got put on hold. Everything got, sidelined, because I had to spend 2 years getting healthy again. And I'm very glad that I did, because if my music career had taken off at that point, it would look very different than it does now. And so I'm grateful for that divine redirection.
Ooh, divine redirection. I like it. Okay, so you said it takes dedication to heal, and it's a lot of work. And so you spent 2 years, you even, like you said, redirected your career. What would you say to people, and to your point that our culture, our Western culture, is so much about the grind and the hustle and things like that? A lot of people don't feel like they have time to be that dedicated to their health. What would you say to that? How did you make the time?
I was in a situation where I really didn't have a choice because I literally couldn't get out of bed. I would sleep for like 14 hours, get up, take a shower, go back to bed. So it was either, figure out what you're going to do or potentially spend the rest of your life like this. And a lot of Lyme situations it's a degenerative disease. So it can act kind of like MS or lupus. It can, really inhibit your bodily abilities, your cognitive abilities. And I was just like, no, I'm not, I'm not doing this.
Yeah.
I'm going to get better. And I would say to people is, you don't not have the time. I feel like for me, it's important to have a healthy, strong body that feels good for as long as I can feel good in this body. We're all going to grow old and we're all going to transition out of this plane. But for me personally, it's extremely important to be as physically able to do what I want to do for as long as I can. I don't ever want to be like, oh, I can't go on that hike, or I can't go to that yoga class, or I can't go out dancing because I'm sore, or,
Yeah.
I want to keep my body well and keep my mind well and sharp. And we, as a society, we do the same thing with like our mental, emotional health as well. In my work as a hypnotherapist, I work with people a lot in kind of unlocking like these patterns and beliefs that we live our lives by that we never question or look at. And if we don't ever question or look at that, we never change. And we keep doing the same things over and over again with different people and different situations.
Yeah.
So it's just, look in, take a look. What's not working? Change it.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like that. So you do all these things, but also your music career has sort of taken off.
Yeah. So after I got physically well, I then was given some opportunities to look at my mental emotional health and kind of check in and check out the trajectory I'm on. I had the opportunity to look honestly at some patterns I'd been recreating, at some beliefs that I was carrying, limiting beliefs surrounding what I could and couldn't do in music and in life. And I continue on that journey of working with those beliefs, as we all will have the opportunity to do. So after kind of towards the tail end of my Lyme experience, I started touring pretty heavily, doing a combination of original stuff and kind of some rough and tumble cover gigs all over the country. And got to travel to some really cool places, meet some, just all the wonderful, weird, interesting people you meet on the road, which I love. That's honestly is got to be close to my favorite thing about touring, is just the people you meet. So often as well, people will come up to you after show and like share something deeply personal, or, whether it's a relationship thing or like a dream that they've carried. And it's like people feel safe to be vulnerable with you because you're standing up on stage being vulnerable.
Yeah.
So that's really a beautiful part of this life that I love so much. I really love being in that space with people, which is probably why I love my therapy work that I do, because I love just creating space for people to just like get tender and like, go go deep and like what's actually happening in here. But so I spent a long time touring, and then I recorded a few songs and then went through a pretty sad breakup. Also parted ways with the manager I was working with at the time. and was just feeling, kind of lost and kind of like, where the heck do I go from here?
Mm-hmm.
And then I had, around that time is when I did my Sedona trip, which was wonderful. And it was kind of like the voice of, I began to listen to the voice of my intuition again on that trip and in that time. And instead of, trying to calculate out my moves, I started kind of going by how do they feel? And like, how does this person feel to work with? Good? Not good? Not good? No, I don't care if they have, all these whatever credentials, and just started checking in with the body with every decision that I made. And then things just started boom, 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 manifesting and getting really magical.
Yeah.
And I had this song called Train, and I wrote it about the kind of the demise of that relationship as it was going down. And I had this vision for a video. I wanted it to be in the desert, but I had not much of a budget. And I'm like, okay, I got to do it. I got to figure out how to make this happen. And so I was talking with different video producers for probably like 7 months.
Okay.
Trying to find the right person. And it was kind of awesome because I wasn't in a hurry. I was totally independent. I didn't have management. I didn't have anybody to keep me on a timeline. So I was like, I'm just going to wait until this feels right.
Yeah.
And then I finally met this guy named Dawson Waters and told him about my vision. And he was like, yeah, let's do it. So then a few weeks later, me and him and his girlfriend at the time, we drove my car to West Texas. We drove like 18 hours straight.
Oh man.
And then got there at sunset, started filming, slept in this little motel, got up at, real early, shot all the next day and morning, and then drove 18 hours back and just filmed the video that I'd been envisioning. And then shortly after that is when I met my current manager, Cliff Doyle.
Mm-hmm.
And that was very synchronicitous. I don't know why I can't think of what the heck.
How do you say that hard word? I think you got it. I think
synchronicitous.
Synchronicitous.
Yeah, we met and we were just immediately connected. And I was like, well, I've got this song, I've got this video, I think it's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, wow, yeah, that's great. And then we released that. And then that video went on to get picked up by CMT. And that kind of began the journey again after it had been kind of incubating for a couple years.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. That vulnerability that you mentioned that you love when you're up on stage and then the people can come share with you. How vulnerable would you say you are when you are songwriting and in these singles that you've had out over the last couple of years? Like you mentioned Train, and you went on to release Rhinestone Rodeo, The House is on Fire, and then your latest one is Memphis. How vulnerable are you in each of those? And how does your, I guess, personal emotion come out in your songwriting?
Yeah, I try to be as transparent as possible. And The House is on Fire is probably the most vulnerable of that set of 4.
Okay.
Memphis is just kind of a fun song, and Rhinestone is honest too. But The House is on Fire. Well, actually, I backtrack a little bit. I wrote a song that's going to be on the new record called On the Way Down, and I wrote it the same day as another song on the record, the new record called Watertown. And I was just really going through a difficult season, and I couldn't sleep. I woke up at like 5 o'clock, made a pot of coffee, and just started writing that day. And I wrote both On the Way Down and Watertown in the same day. And it was like, I gave myself permission to write just for me.
Mm.
And I had kind of been phasing out of co-writing for a while because I just felt like I was making compromises that I didn't really want to make anymore.
Mm-hmm. And
writing those 2 songs really changed me and changed my whole relationship with writing and where I can go with my writing. And then I wrote The House is on Fire actually after those two songs. And then the new record, I kind of followed that same pattern of just laying it all out and not really worrying about it being too much, or if this person's going to like it or whatever, or if it's weird, or I was just like,
this is it.
I'm just going to do what I feel. And again, following that process of like, instead of thinking about the lyric of like, well, would this make sense or that rhyme, blah, blah, blah. I just let it be like an intuitive process of checking in with the body. Like, does this feel like what this lyric should be?
Yeah.
No? Okay, we'll let it sit for 6 months until it comes out. Or and oftentimes what happens is the lyrics will come out right away. And then I'll get in my head and then I'll go, well, I don't know if that's good enough. And then I'll let it marinate for a while. And then oftentimes I come back to the first lyrics that came out.
Yeah. Did your experience with Lyme help you sort of hone this intuitive, creative process?
Yeah, I would say in a way, definitely, as it taught me to check in with the body. And as well, around the time that I was sick with Lyme, I started practicing yoga because I couldn't really work out, which I was very active. I was like running and kickboxing at the time, and I couldn't do hardly anything active when I was sick. So I would just go to like restorative yoga classes, and sometimes I couldn't even do those. And I would just like lay on the mat for like half the class, but just like being in that space also taught just such a awareness and connection to the body, which I think is so important. Body carries so much wisdom, and it's telling us what we need if we just listen to it.
Yeah. Ooh. Okay. And speaking of listening to it, you do have a new project coming up.
Yes, I do.
Yeah. So please tell us what's next for you and where we can find all of these amazing things that you have coming out.
Yeah. So, well, I think by the time this comes, I think the project will be here.
Yeah.
It's called Until the Sun Comes Back Around. And you can find it on all of the places you listen to music. And the first single is Bad News Baby. And second single is Godspeed Los Angeles.
Ooh.
Yeah, I'm so excited about this project. It has been such a long time coming. Cliff and I started dreaming of this project back in 2018 when we started working together. We had some singles, but we knew that we wanted to make a record. And we met with many different producers, some of whom are my literally like dream producers, had many adventures seeking a producer for this record, and for various reasons didn't work out or just didn't quite feel right. And we ended up working with someone named Tim Craven on this record, who's amazing. He did such a beautiful job and just brought so much, just a different perspective on the songs, and was so generous with his time and his energy and what he brought to it. And it's just, I'm so glad to just finally have these songs be brought to life and finally get them out. We've been started recording in 2020 and kind of finished in early 2021. And yeah, I'm just so ready to birth this baby.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, guys, check the show notes for this episode to get the links to Hannah's new project. And what's your website?
It is hannahbethel.com.
Okay. And then do you have socials people can follow you on?
I do. Yeah. I'm most active on Instagram, but also on Facebook. Go to YouTube if you want to check out any of the music videos. There's the one for Train and Rhinestone Rodeo, House is on Fire. You can check all those out there too.
Great. And then one more thing, if people want to get in touch with you for hypnotherapy or that kind of work, where do they go?
You can go to hifihealing.com. That's HIFI healing.com.
Awesome. Well, Hannah, thank you so much for coming on the show and just being so open about your story and your experience. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yes, thank you, Brandy. I really appreciate you having me and asking such great questions and making space for me to talk about all the totality of my journey.
Subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and learn more at humanamplified.com. This episode is brought to you by the Human Amplified Healing Priorities Workbook. Start making decisions about the healing you need most right now by downloading your free workbook at humanamplified.com/episodes/093.